Hi, Dave. How are you?
I am good, thank you.
um, yeah. So we chatted
Yes.
about a week ago now. I was looking to hire some white labeling talent for Minometrics, and we ended up connecting and geeking out all over OpenClaw. So. Um,
Y
this
y
is almost a redo of what we did
y
then, except it's
yeah, yeah,
recorded and we're sharing.
you mentioned that you were all in on AI, and of course, that piques my, "Oh, really? Tell me more." And, one thing led to another, and, here we are. I was very surprised because I've talked to a lot of people in the last month. I mean, that's all I basically do for my job is talk to people, and nobody else had gone down the same path as me, or even had considered it. So it was very exciting. I've been like bottling up my passion for OpenClaw, and I finally got to release it. So thank you.
Yeah. So before we continue on, just tell everyone who you are, what you do.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
it'd be
So
nice to,
I'm
right, introduce ourselves. That'd
introduce.
probably be good.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm Dave Ward. I am CEO and founder of Meticulosity. We've been in business for over 17 years as an agency. Spent the first 5 in very technical e-commerce development and implementation. Became a HubSpot customer when it was time to grow our agency, and found inbound extremely successful for us. So we pivoted into offering inbound and did that for about 10 years as our primary service. And I went through what I like to call a mid-agency crisis 2 years ago, when I realized that, I don't know, I wasn't where I was expecting to be after 15 years and lots of different things. But I realized that it was because I had never listened to Dan Tyre, that the riches were in the niches. And so 2 years ago, we did a total 180 on not really what we do. We're still doing the same thing, but who we do it for. And so for the last 2 years, we've worked exclusively with other agencies doing white label fulfillment. And it's been great. It was everything I was missing and then some. And we've gone from, no agency clients 2 years ago to we're working with over 60 today. And we've done 14,000 some odd hours over the last 2 years. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm Lica from Mitometrics. I reached out to you because my story is a little bit different. I was doing really well, and then I had to let go of my team. And ever since then, I've been trying to build back using AI. And yeah, been in the HubSpot ecosystem. I think that's how we got connected. Justin Kahlberg, my PDM, was like, "Hey, you should go speak to David Ward at Meticulosity." So, some people might be familiar uh, with my progress and how things changed in the HubSpot ecosystem for me. Um, and yeah, my thing was to build back using only AI agents. However, I do believe that we need to have that human in the loop, and that's kind of why I was reaching out to you for talent to get going. And then we just totally bonded over OpenClaw. So, how would you describe OpenClaw?
Um, it's interesting because I've tried to explain it, and I'm at a bit of a loss for words every time I do. But it's basically a collection of AI agents that can work together, and as well as independently, and do whatever it is you tell them. I mean, the OpenClaw comes with a blank slate, and a lot of people that are in the community are building personal assistants, or things like that. And I've been passionate about automation, for over 10 years, and really the automation of AI. And when I saw it, I thought, gee, I wonder what this thing could do. I use it, I think, differently than a lot of people, as do you, but we both do similar things, but with different approaches. So it's been really interesting having
Yeah.
these conversations.
And that was actually the wildest thing, right? Like we jumped on this call and then we're like comparing notes and I'm like, "Oh, you pretty much build out similar things. It's not the same. Maybe the methods are slightly different. We were solving for the same problems, which was just, mind-blowing in my opinion. What would you say to people that are using Claude Cowork or Gemini's anti-gravity? Like why OpenClaw over these other platforms?
See, I don't think it's the same thing at all, and it's interesting because there's been a lot of buzz, with Anthropic releasing some really major updates over the last week. That it's Claude's answer to OpenClaw, and I don't see it that way. I mean, you with Claude Code, you or Cowork or whatever, you've got to sit down and you give it a distinct mission, and it'll work and do that. But, you know, OpenClaw is like there and waiting wherever you are, which is a big departure from, Claude Cowork. But it also can be brought to life every 5 minutes, every hour, every 6 hours, whatever you want, to do tasks on a regular basis without you being there to hit, start. Or God forbid if you're using Cowork and you have to approve every single action, you can't leave your desktop and let it work. But Claude Code is, I'm sorry, OpenClaw is running and doing things 24 hours a day.
Yeah. And I think because we are both in that HubSpot ecosystem, one thing that you can't do with Claude Cowork is trigger things off a webhook. Maybe that'll change in the future, but can't do it right now. And because it's so easy to fire off a webhook from a HubSpot workflow, uh, there's a lot of like state changes within HubSpot that OpenClaw can react to, which initially was something that I was very intrigued by. Um, in terms of, uh, and I think you and I see eye to eye on this as well. Claude Cowork, Anti Gravity, those are really good for like personal assistance, like help me out. But I think we both set on this path of trying to create a hybrid team of like AI employees that we can use.
Yes.
So yeah, so tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's not something that you know, Claude Cowork can't really interact with the rest of your human team.
Yeah. And the very first thought I had when I read about it was, what can this do for my team and my entire agency? Not what can it do for me. However, because I'm the best guinea pig, I did start with me first, so the first agent that I built was, a to help me as the CEO. And, the my goals for the whole thing from the beginning was to buy back time. I know that there's folks at least claiming to be making money off of OpenClaw, and I'm not quite sure how to do that. But what I can do is save time, which is the same thing as making money when you're in a busy agency. So, yeah, that was my approach, was what can this do to make life easier?
Yeah. And I agree with you. For me, like, because people are always like touting the like, well, how much money are you actually making? How much money? And it's like, like can't really quantify it on a monetary level, but I can quantify it on time saved. So like,
Yes.
we crunch the numbers, 160 hours, 4 weeks worth of time saved in a week. That's insane. So, and you did
Well,
something similar
and
as well,
yeah,
right?
I thought again there were all these surprises on our first chat because one of the things I did fairly early on was trying to quantify how much time it saved. And it was easier to do than I thought, because again, with Cowork doesn't have a log that you can go back to and see all the things that have happened over the last day, week, month. but with OpenClaw, it's storing every action it does. And so we were, able to go, okay, well, how long would it take me to look at an email and decide if it was something that I needed to read or not, and then file it? I mean, even if you are conservative and you say that's 5 seconds or 10 seconds, when you're talking about getting 200 emails a day times 10 seconds, those are tangible things. And when you're doing that across, again, not just me as a personal assistant, but a team of 10 folks, the math starts to really add up. And, yeah, I think we're saving about 4 full-time equivalent days a week in what OpenClaw is doing for us. And to me, that's just mind blowing because the investment was a relatively cheap computer. And I mean, we could have done it other ways and not had to buy that, but I'm sure we'll get to
Yeah.
that later.
Yeah, well, we've got there's plenty to discuss. One of the things that I've noticed personally, because you said the same thing as well, like putting yourself as the guinea pig first, right? Like before we roll this out to a ton of clients, which I think we're slowly but surely getting closer to that. It was like let's be our own guinea pigs. Let's just stress test this and see if it works, right? And what I realized is when I'm working and I task switch, there's a good chance that with my multiple tabs open that I go down a rabbit hole and not actually finish the task that I set out to do. It's just like, oh, oopsies. And then 2 hours later, it's like, oh yeah, that's really I did this, wanted to go take care of this because of this task. And AI agents don't have that problem at all. There's
Right.
no task switching loss there in any way, shape, or form, which gives you an argument as well for multi agents in a
Well,
business.
and uh, probably a bit of a potentially ADHD, trait of going down a rabbit hole and realizing hours later that you've done it is to me actually I think that that's one of the things that's been satisfying about having a multi-agent team is that I can have 4 ideas and set 4 things off to go execute those very quickly. I don't have to wait for one to finish. Again, when you're using Cowork, you give it a task, you can't start another task until it's done, at least not to my knowledge. So, especially depending on what you're trying to do, if it's controlling the computer or those kinds of things. So, with OpenClaw being able to just go forth, I find it very nurturing for my ADHD because sometimes I get a bunch of ideas at once and I can get them all out and in the open. And again, it can do research and have it ready for you when you have time. That there's so much it can do.
Yeah. Do you think that's a bit of a CEO curse, that ADHD, multiple
Oh,
things, being the idea person?
I'm convinced that a high percentage of us CEOs are probably neurodivergent in one way or another. And, I mean, because there's so many different things you have to think about to run a business at the same time, and you have to have that multi-stream. I guess I have multi-agents, right? I have a
Yeah.
multi-agent brain in, that I have different pieces in my head moving and thinking about totally different things that are still connected and yet not. Yeah, I've encountered that trait with a lot of, the entrepreneurs I've worked with over the last 25 years.
Yeah. I find it very refreshing, like all that multitasking that we can do and that we normally do in like the day to day of running a business to be able to hand that over to somebody else. I think there's something to be said for human in the loop though, and I think we'll cover
Yeah, yeah.
some of the more nitty gritty stuff in the next couple of weeks, because I do think this is not going to stick with one convo.
No,
So
no, we barely
there's so
touched it.
much stuff. So, one thing that I definitely wanted to kind of cover today was how did you get started with OpenClaw? What was the initial spark, and where did you go, like to get
Uh,
started?
so I'm a Redditor, and, so things started to pop up on Reddit in my feed. I wasn't necessarily following any particularly communities that would have led me to discover it, but I had seen it on my radar. And then I actually had an employee of mine mention OpenClaw, and well, it was, I don't know what it's called. It's Moltbot or Claude Code or OpenClaw or something. And so I did a little bit more research, and I started safely. I mean, I just said, okay, I'm going to just start a new account on my Mac because I wanted it to be away from, I wasn't going to run something potentially scary on my primary account on my Mac. And I just created a new account and I read how to install it, and actually then said, I don't want to do this. And I had Claude Code do all the installation. It took 5 minutes, and I had an agent sitting there waiting for what I wanted it to do. It was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
What model did you use to start?
I went with the pure open claw. I mean, I know there are different flavors, but I just went with the pure original open claw.
Yeah. I did the same thing, and I think security is definitely an issue. I have people that even today sent me like messages on like, "Oh my God, you're using OpenCloud. Like, it's so dangerous. There's so many security issues." And I do believe there's a lot of security issues, but there's also ways that you can solve for them. And the
Right.
one thing that I did early on was just I went and jumped on a virtual server. I figured worst case scenario, shut down the account in like 3 months' time. Um, and it was just so easy. It was like a single click to pre-install, and then I did the same as you and just I used Opus 4.6, which was kind of expensive early on.
Yes.
But that was the architecture, and it got me there quite quickly and then refined from there.
So uh I guess what I should say is, before I even built my first agent, I did take a security approach. So I had known that there was some potential concern, at least. I don't know if danger is the right word, but that there was concern and I should do it right from the beginning. So the first thing I did was, Google how to secure OpenClaw, and I found a primer, and I did, the 5 steps that were in there, and then I felt, better going forward. And I've kept security and, those kinds of things sort of in mind with everything. It's just like, a WordPress site. You can get all excited and you can install 600 plugins, but you got to know where those plugins came from. It's
Yeah.
really, I don't see it much different than WordPress. I mean, again, if you put a WordPress site up there and you don't secure it, it's going to get hacked, because that's what people do. And so you install WordFence and you use a good host and you be careful about your plugins, and you don't install too many, and then you have a good time.
Yeah. Go custom if necessary. It's
Yes.
funny because I think we're both, let's just call it, we're both seasoned. So we both come from an era where WordPress sites were like the way that you would deploy a site if you were a SMB. And there's, people were making good money trying to secure those. I feel like with OpenClaw, because it is open source, that level of fun has kind of returned, right? Like
Hmm.
WordPress at the time was like, you know, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And I don't know if that's exactly true for OpenClaw, but it has that vibe of like, let's innovate. Let's push the boundaries. What are you building? What am I building? Like, let's share.
It is like, a pile of Legos with no instructions. You can build whatever it is that you want, and and there are literally thousands of for something that's only been around for 2 months to like almost to the day. There's thousands of plugins and ways to extend it, and things that other people have done, and you can, yeah, there's a lot of fun in the sort of tinkering and understanding. And the thing that I've found surprising is recently, like, I'm seeing features that SaaS has, that, oh, I'm using some other tool that I'm paying for. And I go, wait a minute, I could do that on OpenClaw. And I'm going to Claude Code and saying, hey, buddy, can you build this onto that? And 40 minutes later, it's done.
And you can trigger it on a cron job or a webhook, which I think is amazing.
And
One
oh, go ahead.
No, no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure, especially in our ecosystem, because I've seen 20 LinkedIn posts about vibe coding your own CRM, versus HubSpot. Have you seen any of these yet?
Yeah.
Now, okay, do I think someone can vibe code HubSpot? No. However, you you know you could. I mean, that it's really, and you could build it to do just what you want. And I think there's probably, again, somewhere in between, oh, in 4 days I built myself a whole HubSpot. That's probably not true. But there's the ability. OpenClaw has given me the ability to create these micro apps that just do the thing that I want to do without having to go and pay $50 a month, $100, $500 a month on a tool. I can literally use vibe coding and OpenClaw, and I can get it done. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
For me, same thing. And I think AI and vibe coding is kind of like putting questions to what does the modern CRM need to look like for sure. But one of the reasons why I'm building this on HubSpot is because it has all the business context. So if I were to do this any other way, I'd have to build out some database of some kind, some rag to that I then have to inject context into for it, like, for the agents to work. But because HubSpot has such a strong API as well, it's so easy to build agents on HubSpot that can pull information from your HubSpot and then take that information to give them context so they can do better work, which I don't necessarily feel I get that same level of context if I'm working out of Claude or ChatGPT, even though they have connectors. Um, I just feel like I can get more nitty gritty on like pull this data.
Yes, and you can control things a lot more too, right? It again, the if you want a micro piece of it, it's there and available. You want to pull in context from different places and use OpenClaw as a channel to get it into HubSpot or to get it into some other source of truth. I mean, context is going to be the word of the year, right? If AI was the word of the year last year, context is the word of this year because, again, you've got all these systems with fragmented knowledge and data and information, and gee, wouldn't it be cool if they could all talk together? That's where we're going. So that was one of the first, again, my personal assistant agent, one of the big missions behind it was pulling all my contacts together. I've got 30,000 emails from the last 2 years. I've got 2,600 recordings of transcripts. I've got calendars. I've got knowledge bases, internal, external. So I could have done it in HubSpot, but I built a rag locally, and now I have this thing that knows everything it could possibly know without being me, attached to all of my agents to give them that context. And so, again, I feel that that the OpenClaw does that because, again, you have multiple agents on one thing that can share context or not.
Yeah.
I have an agent that nobody, doesn't share anything with anybody, and it's all in its own silo. But there's a reason, right?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of part of the architecture too. Like, how do you architect your open claw? Partly for safety, partly to prevent hallucinations. partly to not blow through your context windows. I had one unfortunate incident. So uh, there, yeah, the big agent that was on Opus 4.6, the most expensive model in terms of token limit. Um, Usually, what I do is I reset the context window every night at midnight to keep costs low. But my Mac Studio did an upgrade, and so it never hit that. And so I kept on using the same context window, and that context window grew and grew and grew and grew without me knowing it. And it was a hefty, hefty sum. So I think there's some stuff if you are going to fire up OpenClaw, to be mindful of, which is that context window. The more you can control the context window, uh, the more affordable it will be. Also, there's other things we talked about this, like running LLMs locally but like the more that you can control that context window in terms of architecture,
Yes.
uh, the more affordable it is, and the less hallucinations, the more solid answers it produces, and the work that it does. So
Going down this path has really expanded my entire understanding of AI, not just with OpenClaw, but I mean, I went 6 months without really knowing what was happening when Claude on the web was running out of, when it finally decided it was done giving me answers and what to do about it. Um, you know, the yes, it's great to sort of have people maybe like us giving you good places to start and what to look at, but that's I think something I've liked too is that I've learned through doing and uh, uh, for just a quick example, getting a bit advanced, I was getting annoyed between, well, I would talk to OpenClaw and I would talk to Claude Code and I would talk to Claude Web because I still like the web browser version, and uh, I I would get frustrated with the one on, Claude knew, or, Claude Code knew one thing and the web knew another thing. And so I set up a database that they all refer to so that no matter which flavor I talk to, I get the same answer because it has the same knowledge. So I've almost set up a knowledge base that's shared between multiple AI platforms. But now I can also go to ChatGPT or to Perplexity, totally different system. I can hook it up to the MCP and I can talk to a different model about the same stuff because of the way I've structured it. And I never would have thought or known how to do that if I hadn't kind of done the same on OpenClaw first, right?
or start to understand what models have what strengths and what weaknesses. I
Yes.
feel that like each of these models, Perplexity, Rock, ChatGPT, Claude, they all have like and then on top of that, like there's a sub layer of all the different models within those platforms as well. What you can use, what you can't use. But for me, that was very much a financial thing where where I was like, oh, I was using Claude
Yeah.
Opus. Very good. Claude Opus blows my mind. Very good at a lot of things. Also, really, really expensive. And after a while, I was like, I gotta
So
gotta pick another model here. Like which
So I
one?
I don't have auto reload on, and that would probably be, especially if you don't know what you're doing, make sure you don't have auto reload on your API credits. But yeah, the first time where you've been there for 2.5 hours and you're playing and you use up $50 in 2 hours of credits and you go, wait a minute, what just happened? And then you reload it and then it happens again. Then that's when that's when you start to really think about which model should I be using Opus to,
Do this, right? If
clean HTML? No. And that's again, didn't have those thoughts beforehand. But I, learned as I went, right?
right. And I think that's the learning experience. So what are some tips that you would give users that are like, great, David, like I want to fire up OpenClaw as well. But I don't want to get charged an arm and leg. Like what are some tips? Maybe some tips on regards to security.
Yeah. I mean, there are So there are some security plugins, that are out there that, again, some security is better than none. So if you just blindly go, and if you do it at the beginning, it'll make life easier than if you put it off. So, whether you use a security plugin or you Google how to secure OpenClaw, that you'll see in 98% of the search results are this thing called Tailscale, which locks down the device you're using so that things can't come in and out if it's not supposed to. And that's the first, if that's all you do, that's better than nothing again. But, there's some other steps. You can do some config files. But here's the thing. I'm I'm a technical person. I'm a super nerd, but I'm not a developer. So even before that, my first suggestion would be is to use Claude Code or Copilot or whatever tool you like and tell it to set up the OpenClaw and secure it, because it's going to go and do that same Google search. It's going to find out all the things. I've seen, posts on Reddit about and LinkedIn even, folks that have spent their whole weekend to get OpenClaw running. And I don't know what they're talking about because mine was running in 10, 15 minutes because I vibe coded it and didn't have to do any of that. So even the security, I found the references to what I wanted to do. There were some, like the Tailscale I had to install, but the rest of it I just gave to Claude Code and said, do this so that I'm safe. And again, that's the beauty of Opus and a lot of models is you can tell it what the outcome you want is, and it'll figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I use Tailscale as well. I think that is, I think, the go-to. I also use failed to ban. It monitors the SSH.
Okay,
So
you're gonna have
yeah,
to
so
gonna
right,
write that
we'll
one
have
down.
to.
Yes.
And then I think you have to look at your ports, which ones are open, which are closed, because I do think, and again, I'm curious to hear from other people, like, you know, reach out to us, put comments in, like ask us questions. I'm curious to hear what other people are doing as well. But yeah, the ports are making sure you're not on like the default ports. Um, that I think is a way that you can secure. And there are some other ways that you can, like, if you're using a Docker instance, which again, it's like a different way of securing your container. You can have rate limiting on that, but yeah, there is ports and just jumping in on Tailscale, and then I think failed to ban. Um, that's those it stops attempts from trying to get in. So um,
And then when you really go all in, 3 weeks later, you have an agent that all it does is security.
right, exactly. How are you communicating with your agents?
So I mean, a lot of people use Discord or Signal or WhatsApp. To me, those aren't places that I am on a frequent basis. But again, trying to serve not just my needs, but my whole team. Well, my whole team's on Slack, you know, 40 hours a week. And so I went the Slack route. I haven't even tried to use OpenClaw on any other platforms. I mean, you can even set it up in iMessage, which there's some cool bells and whistles. You can do a voice message and talk to your OpenClaw, like, and it'll pick it up and transcribe it and do the thing. That does sound cool, but the last thing I want to do to my team is bring them another tool or another thing they have to be on. That again, the entrepreneur shiny object syndrome of, oh, here's a new tool, guys, let's use this. So I wasn't about to make them get onto Discord or something. I figured we were already in Slack, and then I realized that was actually a really awesome choice because Slack has the block kit where you've got little buttons, you can do actions, and I was able to teach my agent. Actually, I taught it a skill to learn all of the functionality of the block kit. So when I ask it to do something now, it automatically comes up with the little buttons for approve, or, accordions to collapse and show things. And it's very, for me, it's an effective way to get the information that it's providing.
Yeah. And I think so that we're in Slack as well, like that's where our bots live. Um, but I think what that approve button does in Slack, it allows you to architect with like the human in the loop in mind. And that
Everything
human, yeah,
I want that approve button on everything, right? You can't risk your agency or your client or your reputation by trusting AI yet. So yeah, to me, the approve button was the first thing that showed up.
right. That we don't want agents going rogue. So
No, not happening.
all right. Well, we're almost at the end. So curious, what are we going to talk about in the next couple of weeks? What do you want to talk about in the next couple of weeks?
I mean, I think we could probably wax on quite a bit just about token management and model management, because again, that I think is a blocker for a lot of folks. If you don't figure that out, you're not gonna you're not gonna want to go too many $100 or $50 days in a row, before you throw the towel in on what am I paying all this money for? Why am I bothering? And I think choosing your models, and again, local versus cloud. And I was all fired up because I did buy a nice fancy, Mac Studio with 36 gigs of RAM, envisioning that I was going to have my own Opus running. It doesn't work that you've got to spend, 20 grand to get a machine that can do that. However, there's plenty of work that my local models can do that don't cost me a thing. And so I'm able to get by now. We have a dozen agents, and we're averaging $3 to $4 a day, in cost. And again, when you're talking about saving hours a day at 55, $75 an hour, whatever the effective hourly rate of an employee is, well, then it's a great a great return on investment.
Yeah. Did you know that you can determine the model per cron or webhook? I found that out the other day. It was so exciting. So like if you run like specific skills or specific SOPs, and you know that we have SOPs. So based on that, when it comes in by the cron job, you can say this cron job should use this model.
Yeah, so
So
I maybe so I don't have any I haven't taken that approach. Again, a different approach of I've actually got, you know, a different models being used for different things within the same actions. If if I want to scrape a web page, well, first off, you don't need AI to do that at all. So the Python that I didn't write, Claude Code wrote, goes and scrapes the page. But, in order to take and scrape a page and turn it into something useful, you've got to get rid of all the HTML and the junk that's in it, right? Well, that is not a job for Opus unless you're a very wealthy person. That's a job for a free LLM. So the first thing is, okay, well, strip all the stuff out of there and use a free model. And then with what's left, well, maybe I want to take that and break it up into, or rewrite it, or whatever it is that I'm doing. Well, that's when I'll go to a higher end model. So I'll use in some of our SOPs, I might be using 3, 4 different models to get one job done, because I'm actually splicing it up based on what the work is, not necessarily what the agent does.
yeah, are you setting it on a skill level or are you setting it on an agent level?
It's on the agent based on what it is they're doing, because some of my agents will do more than one thing that, I've got them specifically. So I think, again, this needs to be another episode of how you built your agents and have given them instruction, because I took a different approach of you. I would say 80% of every one of my agents is scripted with very specific instructions. They're following an SOP that's being done by Python, because then it's the same every time and there is no hallucination to worry about. I think you've taken more where they're a lot more driven, or I know other people have at least, where it's the AI doing, where you've given AI a set of instructions and it's following those things. And there's pluses and minuses of both. Yours are more free thinking, yours come up with more novel approaches, mine don't, but I probably have more expected results every time, less hallucination, and I probably have a lower cost because I'm not using AI to do a bunch of those steps. Again, that's I think another topic, but
That'll
yeah,
be homework for next week is to we'll go over the, anatomy of an AI agent and compare what your anatomy is to what our anatomy is, and then compare notes,
okay,
because I think different use cases, right? So, all right. Well,
can't
that
wait.
brings us to yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of everything. And any parting words for the audience?
Uh, d- do it. If you're uh claw, claw curious,
Curious, I like that.
if you're
That's gonna
claw
be the
curious,
hashtag.
yeah, absolutely. Go check it out. Again, it's saving me time and my employees time to with no doubt that there's an ROI. My Mac Studio has already paid for itself. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, definitely follow us on LinkedIn. We will be posting more in the next couple of weeks.
yeah, see you next week.
See you next week.